The auction barn fell silent, not out of respect, but indifference. Inside a rusted crate, a German shepherd trembled, ribs sharp beneath matted fur. No bids, no hope, until one man stepped forward and changed everything. Dust swirled in thick golden clouds through the open doors of the old livestock auction barn, catching the late afternoon sun like floating embers. Boots stomped on packed earth. Voices rose and fell in casual barter, and the air smelled of hay, sweat, and diesel. It was the tail end of another routine sale. Cattle sold, goats claimed, chickens clucking in wire cages. Most buyers were already drifting toward their trucks, hats pulled low, minds on dinner and home. Then came the scrape of metal on concrete. Two handlers dragged in a crate so battered it looked salvaged from a junkyard. Rusted hinges, dented walls. One corner caved in as if something had thrown itself against it again and again. The crowd paused. Murmurs rippled. This wasn't part of the usual lineup. The auctioneer cleared his throat, adjusting his mic with forced cheer. "Last animal of the day, folks," he announced, gesturing toward the crate. German shepherd. Male. Age unknown. A few people glanced over, then quickly looked away. Someone scoffed. Another shook his head. The energy shifted from commerce to discomfort. No one wanted to look too long at what was clearly a burden, not a bargain. Inside that cage, the dog sat motionless in the far corner, curled into himself like a question mark. His fur was matted with dirt and dried blood. His eyes glazed not with fear, but with a deep, quiet exhaustion. Every rib pressed against his skin like piano keys under thin cloth. He hadn't barked once since arriving. Hadn't snapped when poked through the bars. Hadn't even lifted his head when strangers debated whether he was worth $50 or just a bullet. He'd been passed from shelter to pound, labeled unadoptable, too damaged, a lost cause. Now, under the harsh glare of the auction lights, he seemed to have surrendered, not to death, but to invisibility. A few people whispered, "Poor thing won't last a night." Others muttered, "Too dangerous. Look at those eyes." Most simply walked away, as if his suffering were an inconvenience they hadn't signed up for. The auctioneer called, "Opening bid, $50. Silence. Not a single hand rose. The dog lowered his head again, letting a single tear fall into the dust at his feet. Then, from the very back of the barn, a single boot step echoed. Heads turned. A man stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that held the weight of storms weathered and battle survived. Ethan Carter, retired Army K-9 handler, moved with the quiet certainty of someone who'd seen too much to be surprised, yet still chose to care. He didn't stare at the dog's scars or flinch at his condition. He saw past the filth and frailty to the spirit beneath, the same spirit he'd once led through war zones and rubble. While others saw a liability, Ethan saw a comrade. Without fanfare, without hesitation, he raised his hand. "50, he said, voice calm but firm. The auctioneer blinked, then nodded. One bid. Going once, going twice, the gavel cracked. Sold. The crowd exchanged glances, some puzzled, some pitying. Why would a veteran waste money on a dog that looked minutes from collapse? As the handlers unlatched the crate, tension thickened the air. Everyone expected the worst. A snarl, a lunge, a collapse. But the dog didn't move. He just stared at the dirt, trembling. Ethan didn't rush. He knelt slowly, one knee sinking into the dust, and extended his palm. Open, relaxed, no threat. Seconds stretched like hours. Then, inch by inch, the shepherd lifted his head. His eyes, glassy with unshed tears, locked onto Ethan's. Something flickered in them. Not fear, but recognition. With a shudder that ran from his ears to his tail, he crawled forward until his cold nose brushed the veteran's skin. A gasp swept through the barn. But what stunned them most came next. When Ethan gave an old signal, two fingers tapped gently against his thigh. The dog's ears snapped upright. His body straightened. He recognized it. This wasn't just any stray. This was a soldier who'd been left behind. At the vet clinic, under soft lights and gentle hands, the truth began to surface. Malnutrition, old fractures, bruising consistent with prolonged confinement. But then the vet parted the fur behind the dog's ear and froze. A faded tattoo. She scanned for a microchip. It beeped. The screen lit up. K. 9 Unit Bravo 7. Status, disbanded. Handler, MIA. Ethan's breath caught. Rex, he'd already named him, had been trained for search and rescue, explosives detection, even combat support. His unit vanished after a classified mission overseas. Records were sealed, personnel scattered. He'd likely been stolen during transport or dumped when his handlers disappeared. Yet through years of neglect, he'd held on to fragments of his training. When Ethan whispered a command in German, the language of his original unit, Rex sat instantly, tail thumping once. Not out of obedience, but memory. He remembered who he was. And now, he had someone who remembered him too. Weeks passed in quiet healing. Ethan fed Rex small meals, brushed his coat until it gleamed, and spoke to him in calm, steady tones. They walked at dawn, sat on the porch at dusk, and slowly rebuilt trust, one silent moment at a time. Rex learned the rhythm of this new life. Safety, consistency, care. His ribs filled out. His eyes lost their haunted edge. And every night, he slept curled at the foot of Ethan's bed, as if guarding the man who'd given him a second chance. 3 weeks later, the same auction barn buzzed with music, laughter, and strings of fairy lights strung across the rafters for a community fundraiser. Families gathered, kids chased each other between hay bales, and ranchers swapped stories over paper plates of barbecue. No one expected to see him again. But when the doors swung open and Ethan walked in, a strong, gleaming German shepherd at his heel, conversation died mid-sentence. It was Rex, but transformed. Muscles filled out his frame. His coat shone like polished mahogany, and his eyes held calm certainty instead of hollow dread. Ethan gave a single hand signal. Rex dropped into a perfect sit, then swept the room in a silent perimeter check. Another gesture. He lay down, alert but relaxed. The crowd erupted in applause. Ranchers wiped their eyes. Even the auctioneer stood speechless, hat in hand. The dog they dismissed as worthless now moved with precision, pride, and purpose, proving them all wrong. Just as the cheers began to fade, Rex's head snapped toward the back of the barn. His body tensed, ears pricked. Then, without warning, he bolted, past tables, past startled guests, straight to a man standing near the hay bales. The stranger staggered back, face pale, eyes wide with disbelief. "Rex," he whispered, voice cracking like dry timber. The dog whined, pawing at the man's chest, tail whipping like a metronome of joy. Tears streamed down the man's face as he sank to his knees. "They told me you died in transit," he choked out. "After I got wounded, they said you never made it home." It was Sergeant Daniel Reyes, Rex's original handler, presumed dead after an IED blast during their last deployment. He'd spent years searching shelters, calling registries, grieving in silence. Now, here he was, holding his partner again, feeling the familiar weight of his head against his chest. He turned to Ethan, eyes brimming with gratitude. "You saved him," he said, voice breaking. "You gave it back to me." But as handlers gently tried to lead Rex away toward his long-lost partner, the dog hesitated. He looked at Daniel, his past, his first hero, then turned slowly, deliberately, and walked back to Ethan's side. He sat firmly at his feet, gaze steady, tail resting. The entire barn fell utterly silent. In that moment, Rex wasn't rejecting his history. He was choosing his future. He'd been lost, forgotten, discarded. But now he had two men who loved him, one who'd fought beside him, and one who'd found him when no one else would. And in his quiet, unwavering loyalty, he showed them both what redemption truly looked like. Sometimes the ones the world forgets are the ones who remember us best. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what's the most unexpected act of loyalty you've ever witnessed?